Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is part 3 of a 3-part series on the future of U.S.-Canada relations. The U.S. and Canada have been allies for generations, but are we watching the beginning of a permanent shift? As trade wars rage and alliances evolve, where is the relationship really heading? For decades, Canada and the U.S. have been inseparable, partners in trade, security, and global affairs. But today that foundation is under pressure. With tensions rising and new global players in the mix, what does the future hold for North America's closest neighbors? This is Frank for America's Geopolitics. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more hard-hitting geopolitical analysis. And if you really want to support the channel, don't forget to check out the links in the description below. Where do you think the U.S.-Canada relations are heading? In this final episode, we look ahead. Will U.S.-Canada relations stabilize, fracture, or enter an entirely new era? Let's find out. Even as trade disputes continue, the U.S. and Canada remain economically linked. But is this relationship stable, or are we just watching the slow unraveling of a once unbreakable bond? Canada is actively reducing its reliance on the U.S., expanding trade with Europe, strengthening deals with Asia, and investing in domestic industries to shield itself from future tariffs. But is this diversification truly sustainable, or will Canada ultimately remain tethered to the American market? For the U.S., Canada remains a major supplier of resources, from oil and natural gas to critical minerals. But with America First policy still in play, will the U.S. continue to treat Canada as a priority or just another competitor? Could Trump or future U.S. leaders use energy exports or trade restrictions as a tool to pressure Canada back into alignment? Meanwhile, technology is reshaping industries and automation is changing the way goods are produced. Could advancements in manufacturing and supply chains make it easier for the U.S. to decouple from Canadian trade entirely? Or will economic interdependence remain too strong to sever? Both countries need each other, but for how long? Are we heading for an uneasy balance or a future where Canada and the U.S. are less partners and more distant economic rivals? Alliances are shifting. Is the U.S. losing Canada? For decades, Canada's foreign policy was simple. Work with the U.S. and follow its lead. That's changing. The world is no longer just U.S. dominated, and Canada is adapting. With tensions escalating, Canada has been strengthening ties with Europe and Asia, looking for new markets and political partners. Prime Minister Mark Carney's visits to France, the UK, and Japan signal a realignment, one where Canada is less reliant on U.S. and more globally interdependent. But how strong are these new relationships? Could they ever replace the economic powerhouse of the U.S.? There's also the China factor. China has been increasing its presence in global trade, offering alternatives to the U.S. economic influence. Could Canada seek deeper economic ties with Beijing? Or will concerns over national security and Western alliances keep that door firmly shut? Could Canada officially distance itself from U.S. influence? With Trump's policies pushing allies away, some argue that Canada's shift isn't just about trade, it's about long-term survival in a world where the U.S. is no longer a reliable partner. But how far can Canada really go? The U.S. remains its closest and most powerful neighbor. Does Canada have the leverage to stand alone, or will economic and security realities force it back into American arms? And if the U.S. sees Canada shifting too far away, could we see a more aggressive American response? No matter how bad trade relations get, one thing has kept the U.S. and Canada closely tied together: security. But even that bond is being tested. Both countries share NORAD, a joint command for North American defense, and are major NATO allies. If U.S.-Canada trade tensions continue, could this military partnership also be at risk? Could the U.S. start prioritizing security agreements with allies over Canada? Meanwhile, Arctic security is becoming a growing concern. Melting ice caps are opening up new trade routes, and both China and Russia are expanding their influence in the region. Canada controls key Arctic waters, but it lacks the military power to defend them alone. Will the U.S. continue to back Canada in Arctic disputes, or could tensions in other areas weaken that commitment? At the same time, Canada faces increasing cyber threats and espionage concerns. Could these national security pressures force Canada to stay close to the U.S. despite economic and diplomatic strains? Or is Canada's best option to pursue a stronger independent security strategy, relying less on Washington? Could the U.S. ever see Canada as more of an obstacle than an ally? Or is the security the one factor holding this entire relationship together? U.S. Canada relations have survived war, economic crises, and shifting global power structures. But right now, we're looking at a future that could be very different from the past. The forces that kept these countries tightly linked, trade, security, and shared political values, are shifting. The question is, how far will that shift go? If trade tensions don't ease, could Canada and the U.S. drift apart permanently? Will Canada's new alliances redefine its place in the world? Or will security concerns ultimately force both nations to work together no matter how deep the divisions run? So where does this go next? Will trade tensions lead to a real fracture? Will security ties hold things together? Or is Canada already slipping away from U.S. influence? Let us know in the comments, what do you think the future of U.S.-Canadian relationships are? And don't forget to like and subscribe. This is Frank for America's Geopolitics. See you next time.